I'll never forget the sound of that hospital door opening, not because it was loud, but because of what walked through it. See, I'd just woken up from a 4-day coma. My body was broken. 23 fractures, internal bleeding. The doctors said I was lucky to be alive after my car went off a cliff at 70 miles per hour. But here's the thing. As I lay there, barely able to move my head, struggling to remember what day it was, the door opened, and my husband Daniel walked in. Not with flowers, not with tears of relief. He walked in wearing a $1,000 suit I'd never seen before, and on his arm, a woman, tall, blonde, powerful, designer everything. And the look on his face wasn't concern. It was annoyance. Like I'd ruined his afternoon by waking up. He cleared his throat, adjusted his tie, and said the words that made my blood run cold even through the morphine. "Chloe, honestly, we didn't expect you to wake up." He said we. The woman beside him, Victoria, smiled. Not a warm smile, a shark smile. She stepped forward with a leather portfolio and said, "I'm Victoria Chen, your estate attorney, and since you're incapacitated, we're here to make things easier for everyone. We just need you to sign a few papers." She opened the portfolio, and I saw it. Divorce papers, power of attorney documents, transfer of assets, my $22 million about to disappear with the stroke of a pen. And that's when Victoria leaned closer, holding out the pen, and her eyes finally focused on my face, really looked at me, at my bruised, swollen face, at my eyes. And I watched the color drain from her skin like someone had pulled a plug. Her hand started trembling. The pen clattered to the floor, and she screamed. A raw, primal scream that brought nurses running, because Victoria had just recognized me. Not as Daniel's broken wife lying in a hospital bed, but as the woman who'd been standing outside her office 3 weeks ago. The woman who'd heard every single word of their plan. The woman who knew they'd tried to kill me, and in that frozen second, as her scream echoed off the sterile walls and Daniel grabbed her arm, hissing, "Shut up, shut up." I realized something. They thought I had amnesia. They thought I didn't remember. But I remembered everything. And I was about to make them pay for every broken bone, every lie, every dollar they thought they'd stolen. Because you see, Victoria wasn't just his mistress. She was the lawyer who controlled my inheritance, and they'd tried to murder me for it. Let me take you back to where this nightmare actually started. 6 months before that hospital room. 6 months before the screaming. Before the cliff. Before everything fell apart. Daniel and I had been married for 3 years. We weren't rich, but we were happy. Or at least, I thought we were. We lived in a modest 2-bedroom apartment in Seattle. He worked in commercial real estate. I was a graphic designer working from home. We had movie nights. We had inside jokes. We had plans for kids someday. Maybe a house with a backyard. Normal stuff. Beautiful, boring, normal stuff. And then my Aunt Marianne died. Aunt Marianne, who I'd met exactly twice in my entire life. Once at a family reunion when I was 7, and once at my wedding where she stayed for exactly 45 minutes. She was my father's older sister, the one who'd moved to Singapore in the 70s and made a fortune in shipping logistics, the one nobody talked about because she'd cut ties with the family decades ago. I didn't even know she remembered my name, but apparently she did. The letter came on a Tuesday morning. I remember because Daniel was home, which was unusual. He'd been working from home a lot lately, which mostly meant conference calls I wasn't allowed to interrupt. But when I opened that letter from Hutchinson and Gray International Law Firm and read the words primary beneficiary and estate valued at $22,000, I screamed. I actually screamed. Daniel came running, and when I showed him the letter, his face did something I'd never seen before. His eyes went wide. His mouth opened, and for just a second, just a flash, I saw something that looked like hunger, raw, desperate hunger. But then he smiled, picked me up, spun me around, and said all the right things. "Oh my God, baby. This is incredible. We're set for life. We can do anything." And I believed him. God, I believed him. I thought we'd won the lottery together. I had no idea I'd just signed my own death warrant. Within 48 hours, everything changed. Daniel, who'd never cared about financial planning, suddenly became obsessed with our assets and wealth management strategies. He started wearing expensive cologne. He joined a gym. He came home late, always with excuses about networking events and industry connections. And then, exactly 1 week after that letter arrived, he sat me down at our kitchen table with this serious expression and said, "Chloe, we need the best. We can't just use some regular lawyer for this. I know someone. Victoria Chen, she's a partner at Morrison & Chen, handles estates for ultra-high net worth individuals. She's brilliant. She's connected. And she owes me a favor from a deal I helped her with last year." I remember feeling weird about it. Why did he already have someone in mind? Why was he pushing so hard? But he kept saying, "We need to protect this, baby. We need someone we can trust." So I agreed. I scheduled the meeting. And 3 days later, I walked into Victoria Chen's glass tower office and shook hands with the woman who would try to kill me. 2 months after hiring Victoria, Daniel started planning our celebration trip. He was insistent, almost manic about it. "We need to do this, Chloe. Just you and me. Before everything gets crazy with investments and foundations and all that stuff. Let's go somewhere remote. Somewhere beautiful." He chose Mount Rainier, a cabin rental 3 hours outside Seattle, nestled in the Cascades. I thought it was romantic. I thought my husband wanted to reconnect before our lives changed forever. I packed our bags with this stupid smile on my face, thinking about stargazing and morning hikes and maybe things would go back to how they used to be. The drive up was strange, though. Daniel was quiet, tense. He kept checking his phone, his jaw clenched tight. When I asked if he was okay, he snapped at me. "I'm fine, Chloe." Jesus, can you not interrogate me for 5 minutes? That wasn't like him. Or maybe it was exactly like him now, and I'd just been making excuses. We drove higher into the mountains, the road getting narrower, the drop-offs getting steeper, pine trees towering on both sides, no other cars, no cell service, just us and the endless winding road. And then, on a particularly desolate stretch with nothing but cliff face on one side and a sheer drop into a ravine on the other, Daniel's whole body went rigid, his hands gripped the steering wheel, and he started screaming, "Oh my God! The brakes! Chloe, the brakes aren't working!" The car was barely going 35 miles per hour. Barely. But he was screaming like we were careening out of control. I remember feeling confused, more than scared. Why was he yelling? We weren't going that fast. We could just... And then he opened his door, while the car was still moving. He unbuckled his seatbelt, looked at me with eyes I didn't recognize, and said, "I'm sorry. Not, hold on. Not, I'll fix this. Just, I'm sorry." And he jumped. He tucked and rolled onto the shoulder of the road like he'd practiced it, like some action movie stunt. And the second his weight left the driver's seat, the car lurched. Hard, to the right. Toward the ravine. I lunged for the wheel, but my seatbelt locked. I slammed my foot on the brake pedal and it went straight to the floor. No resistance. Nothing. Just a useless piece of metal. And in that split second, as the tires left the road and the world tilted sideways, I understood. The brakes didn't fail. They were cut. Daniel didn't panic. He planned this. And I was about to die so he could take my $22 million. The car hit the first boulder 20 feet down, and everything exploded. Glass. Metal. Pain. I remember the sound of my own ribs cracking. I remember tasting blood. I remember the world spinning and spinning and spinning and thinking, this is it. This is how I die, and he's going to get away with it. The car flipped twice more before wrapping around a pine tree, passenger side first, my side. The impact knocked me unconscious instantly. But here's what I learned later, what the police report said. Daniel called 911 exactly 14 minutes after I went over that cliff. 14 minutes. He waited, watching, making sure. And when he finally made that call, he was crying, performing, playing the devastated husband who'd barely survived a tragic accident. The paramedics said he was hysterical when they arrived, begging them to save me, saying he'd do anything. And I'm sure he meant it. He'd do anything to make sure I never woke up. I woke up 4 days later. 4 days of darkness. 4 days where Daniel thought he'd won. The first thing I felt was pain. Everywhere. Like my entire body had been shattered and glued back together wrong. I couldn't move my left arm. My ribs screamed with every breath. My face felt swollen, tight, wrong. The fluorescent lights above me were too bright, and I could hear machines beeping in rhythm with my heartbeat. A nurse appeared above me, her face blurry. Chloe, can you hear me? Oh, thank God. You're at Harborview Medical Center. You've been in an accident. You're safe now. Safe. That word felt like a joke. I tried to speak, but my throat was raw from the breathing tube they'd removed. I managed one word. Daniel? The nurse's expression shifted, just slightly. A flicker of something uncomfortable. Your husband was here the first day. He stayed for a few hours while you were in surgery, but we haven't seen him since. 4 days. I'd been unconscious for 4 days, and my husband had visited once. My phone was in the drawer beside my bed. Cracked screen, but it still worked. 23 missed calls from numbers I didn't recognize. Probably Victoria's office. Probably creditors. Probably everyone circling my money like vultures. But nothing from Daniel. Not a text. Not a voicemail. Nothing. My hands were shaking as I dialed his number. It rang 4 times, and I was about to hang up when he answered, but he didn't say hello. I heard music. Loud music. Laughter. The clink of glasses. A party. And then his voice, annoyed and slightly slurred. Yeah? What? I could barely get the words out. Daniel, it's me. I'm awake. I'm in the hospital and He cut me off. Are you serious right now, Chloe? I'm at a thing. An important thing. Can this wait? A thing. I'd been in a coma for 4 days, and he was at a party, calling it a thing. I heard a woman's voice in the background, sultry, close to him. Daniel, baby, come back. You're missing the toast. Baby. She called him baby, and then I heard it, clear as day. Daniel's voice, not directed at the phone but at someone near him, careless and cruel. It's just my wife. The loser finally woke up. Laughter. Multiple people laughing. Like it was a joke. Like I was a joke. And then the line went dead. He hung up on me. I stared at that cracked phone screen, and something inside me broke. Or maybe it didn't break. Maybe it calcified, hardened into something sharp and cold and focused. Because in that moment, lying in that hospital bed with 23 broken bones and a husband who called me a loser at a party with his mistress, I made a decision. If Daniel thought I was going to die quietly and let him take everything, he was wrong. Dead wrong. Daniel finally showed up 3 days later. 3 days of me lying there alone, nurses whispering sympathetically, physical therapists helping me take my first agonizing steps. And then, on day 7 of my hospital stay, he walked through that door like nothing had happened. He was wearing a suit, not the jeans and hoodie he'd normally wear. A tailored navy suit with a crisp white shirt, no tie. His hair was freshly cut. He smelled like expensive aftershave, and the second he saw me, his face crumpled. Tears. Actual tears streaming down his face as he rushed to my bedside. "Chloe. Oh God. Chloe. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." He grabbed my hand, the one that wasn't in a cast, and squeezed it like he was drowning, and I was a life raft. I've been a mess, a complete mess. I couldn't face you. I felt so guilty. Guilty. He used that word. Guilty. I just stared at him, this stranger wearing my husband's face, and waited. He sat down in the chair beside my bed, still holding my hand, his thumb rubbing circles on my palm like he used to do when we watched movies. That day, the accident, I panicked. Chloe. When the brakes failed and I jumped, I went into shock. Complete shock. I didn't know what I was doing. I could barely function. He wiped his eyes with his free hand, and I noticed his watch. A Rolex. Brand new. I'd never seen it before. I called 911 as fast as I could, but then when they took you away, when they said you might not make it, I couldn't handle it. I know that's selfish. I know I should have been here every day, but I was falling apart. Falling apart at parties, apparently. Falling apart while calling me a loser to his friends. But I didn't say that. Not yet. I just watched him perform, this elaborate theater of grief, and I wondered how long he'd been practicing these lines. And then Victoria, your lawyer, she's been amazing. She reached out after she heard about the accident, wanted to help. She's been keeping me grounded, helping me process everything. We've been meeting about the estate, about your care, about what happens if... He trailed off, letting the implication hang there. If I died. What happens to the money if I died? She's coming by later, actually, to check on you, to see what you need. His voice was so earnest, so concerned. And if I hadn't heard him on that phone call, if I hadn't heard the music and the laughter and the cruel nickname, I might have believed him. I might have thought my husband was just traumatized and confused. But I knew better now. I knew exactly what he was. So I did something I'd been planning since that phone call. I softened my face, let my eyes well up, squeezed his hand back weakly and whispered, "I'm just glad you're here now. I was so scared." And I watched relief flood his features. Relief that I was still the same naive, trusting Chloe, the wife who believed his lies, the obstacle he thought he could still remove. But what he didn't know, what neither of them knew, was that I remembered everything, and I was about to become the worst mistake they ever made. But let me tell you what I actually remembered. What I'd been replaying in my head every single hour since I woke up in that hospital bed. 3 weeks before the accident, I'd gone to Victoria's office for what was supposed to be a routine signing. Just some paperwork to finalize the trust structure, transfer some bonds, normal estate stuff that I didn't really understand but trusted her to handle. I arrived 15 minutes early because I'm always early, and the receptionist told me Victoria was running behind. She's just finishing up a call. "Have a seat, Miss Parker. Can I get you water? Coffee?" I took the water and sat in the waiting area, scrolling through my phone. But then I heard voices. Raised voices coming from the office next to the conference room where I was supposed to meet Victoria. The walls in that fancy high-rise were thinner than they looked, and one of those voices was Daniel's, my husband, who was supposed to be at a site inspection in Tacoma, who'd kissed me goodbye that morning and said he wouldn't be home until dinner. I stood up, moving closer to the wall, my heart already starting to race because why was my husband in my lawyer's office without telling me? And that's when I heard Victoria laugh. Not a professional laugh, an intimate laugh, low and throaty and wrong. "You're terrible," she said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. She actually bought the whole romantic cabin getaway thing. Daniel's response made my blood turn to ice. Completely. She even offered to pack my bag. It's almost too easy. I pressed my ear against the wall, my water bottle forgotten on the side table. Every nerve in my body screaming that something was catastrophically wrong. Victoria's voice again. "And you're sure about the mechanic?" "He won't talk. Daniel, he's family. My cousin Marco, he owes me. And he knows if this goes sideways, he's going down too. He'll cut the brake lines Friday night. We do the drive Saturday morning. Clean. Accidental. Tragic young wife loses control on a mountain road." The room started spinning. I grabbed the wall to steady myself, but I couldn't stop listening, couldn't move, couldn't breathe. "Victoria, what about the life insurance?" "Daniel, $2 million. But that's just the opener. The real money is the inheritance. Once she's gone, as her spouse, I inherit everything. All $22 million. No trust restrictions. No foundation requirements. Just mine." Silence. Then Victoria, cautious. "Ours, you mean?" Daniel laughed. Actually laughed. "Right. Ours. 50-50 split. Just like we agreed. You handle the legal cleanup. Make sure there's no questions, no investigations. I play the grieving widower for 6 months. We get married, and we're set for life." I heard movement, footsteps getting closer to the door, and Victoria's voice, sultry and satisfied. "I have to say, Daniel, marrying you is going to be the most lucrative decision I've ever made." That's when I ran. I didn't think. I just moved, grabbed my purse, mumbled something to the receptionist about feeling sick, and got out of that building as fast as my shaking legs would carry me. I sat in my car in the parking garage for 20 minutes, hyperventilating, trying to figure out what to do. Call the police and tell them what? That I'd overheard a conversation that could be explained away as a sick joke. That my husband and my lawyer might be planning to kill me. But I had no proof, no recording, nothing but my word against theirs. I drove home in a daze, and when Daniel came home that night, late, smelling like perfume that wasn't mine, I pretended everything was normal because I needed time to think, time to plan, time to figure out how to survive what was coming, but I ran out of time. And 3 days later, I was in that car, watching my husband jump to safety while I went over a cliff. Only now I was still alive, and they had no idea I knew everything. So when Victoria walked into my hospital room 2 hours after Daniel's tearful performance, I was ready. She looked immaculate. Charcoal gray suit that probably cost more than my old monthly rent. Her blonde hair pulled back in a perfect chignon. Diamond studs that caught the fluorescent light. She carried a leather portfolio under one arm and had this practiced expression of concern on her face. Professional, appropriate, fake. "Chloe," she said softly, like we were old friends, "I'm so relieved to see you awake. Daniel told me you were making progress, but seeing you, it's truly a miracle." She set the portfolio down on the rolling table beside my bed and sat in the chair Daniel had occupied earlier. Same chair, different predator. I watched her carefully, keeping my face neutral, drugged, confused, playing the part. "How much do you remember about the accident?" she asked, and I caught it, the slight tension in her shoulders. The way her fingers tightened on her knee, she needed to know what I knew. I let my eyes unfocus slightly, like I was struggling to think through brain fog. I don't know. It's all blurry. Daniel said the brakes failed? My voice came out weak, uncertain. Perfect. Victoria exhaled, and I saw her shoulders drop half an inch. Relief. "That's right," she said gently. "A terrible mechanical failure. You're very lucky to be alive." Lucky. Sure. Do you remember the days before the accident? The planning? The drive up to the mountains? I shook my head slowly, wincing like the movement hurt. There are holes. Big holes. The doctor said that's normal. With head trauma. I made it a question, vulnerable, seeking reassurance, and Victoria smiled. Actually smiled. Very normal, she assured me. The brain protects itself by blocking out traumatic memories. You may never get those days back, Chloe, and honestly, that might be a blessing. A blessing for her, she meant. A blessing that I couldn't remember standing outside her office, hearing every word of their murder plot. I brought some documents, she continued, opening the portfolio. Nothing urgent, just some estate paperwork we need to keep current. I thought while you're recovering, we could handle a few administrative items. Take the pressure off. I looked at the papers she was arranging on the table. Powers of attorney, beneficiary updates, authorization forms that would give Daniel access to my accounts in case of continued incapacity. They were trying to lock it down now. While I was weak, while I was confused, while they thought I didn't remember. I don't know if I should sign anything right now, I mumbled, letting my eyes drift closed like I was exhausted. My head feels foggy. Maybe when I'm feeling better? Victoria's jaw tightened, just for a second. But she recovered quickly. Of course, she said smoothly. We have time. You focus on healing. Daniel and I will make sure everything else is handled. Daniel and I. She said it so naturally, like they were a unit, like I was already dead and they were just waiting for the paperwork to catch up. She stood to leave, gathering her papers, and paused at the door. Chloe, I want you to know that Daniel loves you very much. He's been devastated by this. And I'm going to make sure you're both taken care of. That's my job. That's what I do. She held my gaze, and for just a moment, I saw it. The calculation behind her eyes. The woman who'd laughed about my death in her office. The woman who was sleeping with my husband while planning to steal my inheritance. And I smiled back at her. Weak. Grateful. Trusting. Thank you, Victoria. I don't know what we'd do without you. She left feeling confident, secure, believing she'd pulled it off. But what she didn't know was that the second that door closed, I reached for the phone by my bed and made a call. Not to the police. Not yet. To someone better, my Aunt Marianne's personal lawyer, the one who'd handled her estate from Singapore, the one who had no connection to Victoria or Daniel or any of this. And I said 6 words that started my revenge. I need help. They tried to kill me. They came back exactly 1 week later. Both of them. Together this time. No more pretending to be separate entities in my life. I'd been moved to a regular recovery room by then. Less monitoring. Fewer nurses checking in. More privacy. Which was exactly what they wanted. I saw them through the window in my door before they knocked. Daniel in another expensive suit, this one charcoal with subtle pinstripes. Victoria in cream-colored silk, a Hermes scarf at her throat. They looked like a power couple from a magazine spread. Beautiful, successful, deadly. Daniel opened the door with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Hey, sweetheart. How are you feeling today? Better, actually. My lawyer, James Chen, no relation to Victoria, had flown in from Singapore 2 days ago. We'd spent hours going over everything. The overheard conversation, the suspicious brake failure, the insurance policies I didn't know Daniel had taken out on me, the transfers Victoria had made from my accounts without proper authorization. James had connections everywhere. Private investigators, forensic accountants, and most importantly, a retired police captain who owed him a favor. But Daniel and Victoria didn't know any of that. They thought they were visiting a brain-damaged widow-in-waiting who couldn't remember her own address half the time. I'm okay, I said softly, keeping up the act. Tired. Everything still hurts. Victoria moved to the chair beside my bed, setting down that same leather portfolio. Always the portfolio. Always more papers. We brought you something. Daniel said, and his tone was gentle, patronizing, like talking to a child. Remember we discussed simplifying things, making everything easier for you to manage? I blinked slowly, playing confused. Maybe? I'm sorry. My memory is still... Victoria placed her hand over mine. Her skin was cold. It's all right, Chloe. That's why we're here, to help. We've prepared some documents that will ensure you're taken care of, no matter what happens. Daniel will have the ability to manage your medical care, your finances, everything, so you don't have to worry about any of it. She opened the portfolio, and I saw them. Divorce papers listing irreconcilable differences and mental incapacity. A power of attorney that would give Daniel complete control of my estate, beneficiary change forms for the life insurance, and a pre-signed check for $15,000 made out to Chloe Parker. Final settlement, $15,000. That's what they thought my silence was worth. That's what they valued my life at. All you need to do is sign here and initial here, Victoria said, holding out an expensive pen. Mont Blanc, probably bought with my money. And then you can rest. We'll handle everything else. Daniel moved to the other side of my bed, and I felt his presence like a threat. Looming. Ready? They thought this was it. The final move. Checkmate. I looked down at the papers, then up at Victoria's face. Her eyes were cold, calculating. The same eyes that had looked at my husband and laughed about cutting brake lines. And I realized this was the moment. The moment everything had been building toward. The moment I'd been preparing for since that phone call where Daniel called me a loser. So I took a breath, let it out slowly, and said the words that would change everything. I'm not going to sign these papers, Victoria. Her smile froze. I'm sorry. I met her gaze directly, and for the first time since waking up, I let her see me, the real me, not the confused victim, not the brain-damaged wife. Me. I said, I'm not signing, because I remember everything. The color drained from Victoria's face like someone had opened a tap. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. No sound came out. What are you talking about? Daniel said, but his voice was tight, strained. His hand gripped the bed rail so hard his knuckles went white. I kept my eyes on Victoria. I remember being at your office 3 weeks before the accident. I was early for our meeting. You were in the office next door with Daniel. I watched her pupils dilate, watched her chest start rising and falling faster. I heard you laughing. I heard Daniel say I bought the whole romantic cabin getaway thing. I heard every single word about the mechanic, about cutting the brake lines, about splitting my $22 million 50-50. The pen fell from her hand and clattered onto the floor. You're confused, she whispered. But there was panic in her voice now. Raw panic. The head trauma. I heard you say that marrying Daniel would be the most lucrative decision you'd ever made, I continued, my voice stronger now, steady. I heard everything, Victoria, and I've spent the last 2 weeks awake making sure everyone else will hear it too. That's when she screamed. Not words, just a sound. Pure terror ripping out of her throat as she stumbled backward, knocking over the chair. Papers exploded from the portfolio, fluttering across the floor like evidence scattering. Divorce papers, power of attorney forms, all of it. Shut up, Daniel roared. And suddenly he wasn't playing the concerned husband anymore. The mask was gone. His face twisted into something ugly, something I'd never seen before but somehow always known was there. You stupid bitch, you were supposed to die. You were supposed to... He lunged across the bed, his hands reaching for my throat. I saw it happening like it was in slow motion, his fingers outstretched, his eyes wild. Murder. This was murder, right here, right now. And he didn't even care anymore. But I didn't scream. I didn't fight. Because I'd been expecting this. Counting on it, actually. His hands closed around my throat, squeezing, and I heard Victoria screaming, "Daniel, stop, stop, not here." But he wasn't listening. He was too far gone, too desperate. "I'll finish this," he snarled in my face, spit flying. "I'll finish what I started on that mountain and—" The door burst open with a bang that echoed off the walls. "Police! Hands where I can see them! Now!" 3 officers flooded into the room, guns drawn, shouting commands. Daniel's hands released my throat instantly as 2 officers grabbed him, slamming him face first onto the floor. Victoria tried to run, actually tried to make it to the door, but the 3rd officer caught her arm and spun her around. "Victoria Chen, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, attempted murder, and fraud." The officer read her Miranda rights while she sobbed, mascara streaming down her face. That perfect facade completely shattered. And behind the officers, standing in the doorway with his silver hair and 3-piece suit, was James Chen, my aunt's lawyer, my lawyer now. He caught my eye and gave me the smallest nod. We got them. Daniel was screaming from the floor, his face pressed against the linoleum, hands cuffed behind his back. "This is insane. I didn't do anything. She's lying." The accident made her crazy. But one of the officers, a woman with steel gray hair and captain's bars on her uniform, crouched down beside him. "Mr. Parker, I'd stop talking if I were you. Especially since we have 3 witnesses who just watched you attempt to strangle your wife in a hospital bed." She stood up and looked at me. "Ms. Parker, are you all right?" My throat hurt where Daniel's fingers had been, but I nodded. "I'm okay." "Thank you, Captain Morrison." She smiled grimly. "We've been listening to everything from the hallway. Your lawyer wired you up pretty good." She gestured to the hospital gown, and I pulled back the neckline slightly to show the tiny microphone taped to my collarbone. Every word, every confession, all recorded. Victoria made a sound like a wounded animal. No, this isn't— we didn't." But she had nothing. No defense. No excuse. Just the crushing weight of her own greed collapsing on top of her. "Here's what's going to happen," Captain Morrison said, addressing both of them like misbehaving children. "We've already obtained a warrant for Marco Delgado, your cousin Mr. Parker, the mechanic who cut the brake lines on your wife's vehicle. He's been very cooperative since we offered him immunity in exchange for testimony." Daniel's face went gray. "We've also frozen all accounts associated with Morrison and Chen law firm pending investigation of financial fraud," the captain continued, looking at Victoria now. "Turns out transferring funds from a client's estate into offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands leaves quite the paper trail." Victoria's legs gave out. She would have collapsed if the officer holding her hadn't held her up. "You can't— I'm an attorney. I have rights." You have the right to remain silent," the captain interrupted coldly. "I suggest you use it." They hauled Daniel to his feet, and as they dragged him past my bed, he looked at me, really looked at me, and for just a second, I saw it. Not rage, not hatred, fear, pure animal fear of what was coming for him. "Chloe, please," he whispered. "Please, we can fix this. I'll give you everything. I'll testify against Victoria. Just— please." I stared at this man I'd married, this man I'd trusted, this man who'd held my hand while planning my murder. And I felt nothing. No love, no hate, just cold, perfect clarity. "You tried to kill me for money you didn't earn," I said quietly. "You called me a loser while I was in a coma. You brought your mistress to my hospital bed to steal what was mine, and you almost got away with it." I leaned forward slightly, ignoring the pain in my ribs. "But I survived, Daniel. And now you're going to spend the next 20 years wishing you'd just asked for a divorce." They dragged them both out, Daniel still screaming about his rights, about being set up, about how this was all a misunderstanding. Victoria silent now, broken, her expensive heels clicking against the floor as they led her away in handcuffs. The room felt suddenly quiet, empty. Just me, Captain Morrison, and James Chen, who was already organizing the scattered papers into neat piles. Evidence. All of it evidence. "You did good, Ms. Parker," the captain said, holstering her weapon. "I've been on the force for 26 years, and I've never seen someone play it that cool. You had him dead to rights the second he put his hands on you." I touched my throat gently. It would bruise. But bruises heal. Death doesn't. "What happens now?" I asked. James answered, his voice calm and professional. "Marco Delgado has already given a full statement about cutting your brake lines at Daniel's request. He provided text messages, payment records, everything. Daniel's facing attempted murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and fraud. Victoria's facing the same, plus a dozen counts of embezzlement and attorney misconduct. The DA is very interested in this case," Captain Morrison added. "High-profile attorney, wealthy estate, attempted murder for hire. This is going to trial, and with the evidence we have, the recording from today, Marco's testimony, the forensic analysis of your vehicle, the financial records, they're looking at 25 to life, each. 25 years. Daniel would be 62 when he got out. Victoria would be 58, their whole lives, gone, because they couldn't wait. Because $22 million was worth more to them than a human life, worth more than me." "There's one more thing," James said, pulling out a document I recognized, my aunt's original will. "Your Aunt Marianne included a clause that very few people knew about. If you died under suspicious circumstances within 5 years of inheriting, the entire estate would go to charity. Daniel would have gotten nothing." I stared at him. "What?" He smiled. "Your aunt was many things, but she wasn't naive. She'd seen too many inheritance murders in her career in Singapore, so she protected you, even from beyond the grave. They'd killed me for nothing. Or tried to. All that planning, all that manipulation, the cut brake lines, the conspiracy, the affair. All of it for money they never would have gotten anyway." I started laughing. I couldn't help it. It hurt my ribs, made my throat ache. But I couldn't stop. The absurdity of it, the beautiful, perfect irony. "She knew," I said through my laughter. "Aunt Marianne knew exactly what kind of person would come out of the woodwork when someone inherited that much money." James nodded. "She was a very smart woman, and she made sure her money went to someone who deserved it, someone who would survive." The trial took 8 months. 8 months of depositions, testimonies, and media circuses. Daniel's lawyer tried everything: temporary insanity, coercion by Victoria, even claiming I'd orchestrated the whole thing for attention. None of it stuck. Marco Delgado testified for 3 hours about exactly how he'd cut the brake lines, showed the jury the texts from Daniel promising him $50,000 once the problem was handled. Victoria's firm was raided, and investigators found years of embezzlement. I wasn't her first victim, just her most lucrative target. Her law license was revoked before the trial even ended. And that recording of Daniel trying to strangle me in the hospital. The jury watched it 4 times. I saw 2 of them crying. When the verdict came back, guilty on all counts for both of them, I was in the courtroom, front row. I watched Daniel's face crumble as the judge sentenced him to 28 years without possibility of parole. I watched Victoria stare straight ahead, emotionless, as she received 32 years for the additional fraud charges. They'd tried to kill me for money they'd never have gotten, and now they'd lost everything. Their freedom, their future, each other. I left Seattle after the sentencing, sold the apartment, donated most of Daniel's things to charity, and moved to Portland. Bought a small house with a garden. Nothing flashy. Nothing that screams, "I have money." Because here's what I learned. Wealth makes you a target, but survival makes you dangerous. I used $2 million to start a foundation. the Marianne Chen Foundation for Financial Abuse Victims. We help people who've been exploited by spouses, lawyers, family members, people who need protection from the ones who are supposed to love them, people like I used to be. My physical therapist says my limp will probably fade in another year. The scars on my face have mostly healed, though I still see them when I look in the mirror. But I don't mind them anymore. They're proof. Proof that I survived a 70-mile-per-hour crash down a mountain. Proof that I survived 2 people who wanted me dead. Proof that I'm stronger than anyone, including me, ever knew. In the end, I survived the wreck. I survived the betrayal. I survived Daniel and Victoria's greed. And they? They didn't survive their own. Sometimes at night, I wonder if Daniel thinks about that phone call. The one where he called me a loser while I was in a coma. I wonder if he replays it in his cell, realizes that was the moment I stopped being his victim and became his worst nightmare. I wonder if Victoria thinks about that scream, the one she let out when she realized I remembered everything. The sound of her perfect plan shattering. But honestly, I don't think about them much anymore. I've got a garden to tend, a foundation to run, a life to live, a life they tried to steal but couldn't. Because here's the truth they never understood. You can't kill someone who refuses to die. And you definitely can't steal from someone who's already decided to take everything back. Pause. So yeah, I survived. And that survival? That was their death sentence. But you know what's crazy? My story isn't even the most shocking one out there. Because greed doesn't have limits. And some people will go even further for money. If you think waking up from a coma to find your husband with his mistress was brutal, you need to hear about the woman who won $15 million in the lottery, only to discover her husband had been planning her accident for months. Click back to the beginning and watch that story. Because trust me, when money's involved, you haven't seen anything yet.